Hi, it's Nicole. Coriolanus is one of Shakespeare's later tragedies. As a character, Coriolanus received mixed reviews and opinions throughout history, a lot of it negative. But I have been drawn to this man more so than Macbeth, I guess partly because I am now more familiar with Shakespeare's plays, I understand his language a bit better. But as a person, I find Coriolanus quite irresistible. He's arrogant, he's angry most of the time, but at the same time he's valiant, noble, honest, modest, and straightforward. A man too consistent and uncompromising to bend his knees, he snaps in the end. And even his name, I love his name. His full name is Caius Marcius Coriolanus. I like the vowels, I like the rhythm of it, I just like the sound of it. I've been thinking a lot about this man in the past 2 weeks. One question is, what caused his tragedy? I kept thinking if he didn't do this, things would have turned out better. If he did this, the end wouldn't have been so nasty. If he could have just avoided one thing. But he acts completely consistent according to his character. He's doomed right from the beginning. There's no way out. The tragedy cannot be avoided. I've also been thinking, what does he want? Something I learned last week. As a protagonist, what does he want? And as we watch him act by act, scene by scene, what does he really want that he doesn't realize? It really hurts my head. It's really hard work. This is, first of all, Shakespeare. His characters are complex. And secondly, this is Coriolanus we're talking about, who is famously a mystery. He doesn't open his heart to the audience. So in this video, we will look at my first impression of Coriolanus, and then secondly, the relationship, the dynamic between himself and the crowd, and thirdly, what I think is the reason that caused his tragedy. Let me summarize the story quickly. Roman citizens are at the brink of an riotous protest at the beginning of the play, claiming Caius Marcius the chief enemy of the people. But an impending war against the Volsces directs everyone's attention and energy externally. Marcius leads the Roman army, successfully conquers Coriolis, and wins himself the name Coriolanus. People lines the streets to welcome him home. Coriolanus asks their votes for him to become consul. They give willingly, but almost immediately change their mind, being persuaded by their leaders. The war hero is exiled. Where will he go? He joins the Volsces, the former enemy, and vows to revenge on his own countrymen. That's not the end of the story. I will not reveal the ending, just in case you haven't read it, even it's from 400 years ago, because a book unread, no matter how old, is a new book. What's your first impression of Coriolanus so far? A war hero, but somehow also the enemy of the people? Harold Bloom calls him an one-man army, the greatest killing machine in all of Shakespeare, an overgrown child. Anywhere except upon a battlefield, he is at best a disaster waiting to happen. He says that Coriolanus is not totally unsympathetic, it's a Shakespearean triumph. I think he means Coriolanus is so cold-blooded, it's amazing that Shakespeare manages to make him show some feeling, to make him show some emotions. I read the chapter in Bloom's book quite quickly and didn't have time to understand everything, so I hesitate to say I disagree with him. But let's just use those comments as a starting point. I don't think Coriolanus is unsympathetic. I think he does have feelings and emotions. I'd even go as far as to say he is a very sensitive person. When his wife welcomes him home after the war in tears, he says, "Wouldst thou have laughed had I come coffin home, that wipst to see me triumph? Ah, my dear, such eyes the widows in Coriolis wear, and mothers that lack sons." In the midst of brutal fighting and killing, he notices the sorrow in the eyes of the young wives and the old mothers in the enemy's city. He sees and feels and remembers their sadness, which I think is remarkable. When he's provoked, he's so full of emotions, his sentences sometimes become incoherent. His frustration turns into anger and bursts like fireworks. But people interpret his anger as hatred towards them. They say Coriolanus does not love the common people, which is not true. Like his old friend, who knows him well, his old friend Menenius says 3 things. 1, he has been bred in the wars since he could draw a sword and is ill-schooled in bolted, meaning refined language. He's just not good at talking. Secondly, his nature is too noble for the world. He would not flatter Neptune for his trident or Jove for his power to thunder. His heart, his mouth, what his breast forges that his tongue must vent, and, being angry, does forget that ever he heard the name of death. He doesn't hide his feelings and thoughts. He'll say whatever comes to his mind without weighing the cost or worrying about offending people. Thirdly, he loves your people, but tie him not to be their bedfellow. That's just some initial thoughts. A lot of people think him a pure brute, but I think there's a lot more to him. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let's admire Shakespeare's genius for a second. Act 1, Scene 1, we get dropped right in the middle of the action, almost half sentence. Before we proceed any further, hear me speak. Speak, speak. Proceed what further? What are they doing? On stage, you see a crowd rushing in, waving sticks and clubs, and you can probably tell from their bare feet, their bony arms, their dirty rags that they are poor. This is some sorts of a riot. You are all resolved rather to die than to famish. Resolved, resolved. Okay, their problem seems to be that they are starving. They are on their way to protest with a firm resolution. They will not back down. They'd rather die in protest today than going home hungry again. Who is this protest against? Coriolanus, our protagonist, at this stage, still called Caius Marcius. We don't see our protagonist with our own eyes here. We hear a third party talks about our protagonist. This is a more interesting way, I think. He adds more layers into the picture. Let's just unpack a little bit. First of all, when you have a third party, especially like here, a crowd, you get a lot of different opinions. Some people think this person is organized. Some people think this person is chaotic. Which one do I believe? Can they both be true? If so, how? Secondly, who is this third party? Can I trust them? Does this third party know our protagonist well? In what capacity? Otherwise, why would I trust them? So let's carry on Act 1, Scene 1. First, you know Caius Marcius is chief enemy to the people. We know it, we know it. Let us kill him and we'll have corn at our own price. Is it a verdict? No more talking on it. Let it be done. Away, away. So we see people's opinion of Marcius. Everyone knows and agrees that Marcius is the chief enemy. They will kill him and they will be able to buy corn and not starve. Then the first citizen explains to the audience how the aristocrats hoard food while leaving nothing to the ordinary citizens, and at this point we hear a second individual citizen speaks. Would you proceed especially against Caius Marcius? Against him first. He's a very dog to the commonalty. See an interesting dynamic here. Even within the same group of poor citizens, there is a questioning voice. Why do you single out Caius Marcius? An aristocrat, obviously, but we soon learn he is not the one in charge. Marcius' crime is repeated. He is very dog to the commonalty, which means exactly he is chief enemy of the people. There's no reason, there's no explanation, just a repetition. He's the enemy. Don't ask us to explain why. And now we see a different aspect of our protagonist. Consider you what services he has done for his country. Very well, and could be content to give him good report for it. But that he pays himself with being proud. We hear the second opinion of Martius. The first one, he's the enemy of the people. The second one, he has done services for his country. And the first citizen can't disagree. Even though the first citizen hates him as the enemy, the one who the first citizen thinks is starving the common people, even he can't deny Martius has done services for his country. Not only that, but he's even willing to give him good report for it. However, the first citizen is still against him. Reason, he's arrogant about his services to the country. Nay, but speak not maliciously. I say unto you, what he has done famously, he did it to that end. Though soft-conscienced man can be content to say it was for his country, he did it to please his mother, and to be partly proud, which he is, even to the altitude of his virtue. Martius is arrogant but valiant, valiant but arrogant. His services is to win fame, to please his mother, and to be proud of what he's capable of, not really for his country and people. One thing particularly fascinating to me, I used to study hard in school for my parents' affirmation. Even now, I subconsciously evaluate my actions with my parents' standard. But until this moment, you don't know about it. It might be obvious to tell that a warrior fights for glory and fame, but how does the whole country come to know that Caius Martius fights to please his mother? I'm not talking about his mother in this video, I really don't like her, so we'll just park that thought and move on. What will the second season say now in response? What he cannot help in his nature, you can't advise in him. You must in no way say he is covetous. Don't blame it on him, it's not his fault. He can't help being proud, or he can't help being valiant. He can't help being proud is a slightly questionable statement, but either way, you can't say he's covetous. According to the dictionary, covetous means having or showing a great desire to possess something belonging to someone else. We see this proven true later on in Act 1, Scene 10, which is my favorite scene. After Coriolanus is conquered, the general asks Martius to pick 1/10 of the riches of the city, anything he wants, before the common distribution of the spoils. Martius replies, I thank you, General, but cannot make my heart consent to take a bribe to pay my sword. I do refuse it, and stand upon my common part with those that have upheld the doing. I will not take more or before my fellow soldiers. That's definitely not covetous. In addition, I find him wonderfully modest. When people praise his valor and victory, he blushes and is embarrassed like a boy, and he keeps asking people to stop talking about it. No more, I say, for that I have not washed my nose that bled, or foiled some debil wretch, which without note here's many else have done. You shout me forth in acclamations hyperbolical, as if I loved my little should be dieted in praises sauced with lies. Stop blowing trumpets and shouting my name just because I haven't washed the blood from my nose, or because I have defeated some weak enemies. Many fellow soldiers here did the same unnoticed. You are exaggerating my small achievements. He rushed into Coriolanus' city gate all by himself and combated a fierce warrior. Straight after that, these are not small achievements. And notice how he draws attention to his fellow soldiers and gives them the praise instead. It's extremely puzzling how a man can be so modest and so proud and arrogant at the same time, but I do love him for it. And let's go back to our two citizens. So the second citizen just said, you must in no way say he is covetous. The conversation continues. If I must not, I need not be barren of accusations. He hath faults with surplus to tire in repetition. Notice how citizen number 1 is reluctantly agreeing again that Martius is not covetous. Fine, he's done services to the country, he's not covetous, but he has plenty other faults. I can't be bothered to list them all one by one, there are too many. By this point, we are only at line 40 in Act 1, Scene 1. If you're watching this on stage, all of this will be gone in about a minute, but we've already learned a lot about Martius, a man with complex personality who divides opinions even within the same political group. When Martius finally enters the scene facing the same mob, we hear his opinion of the people immediately. In passionate, abusive language, his main problem with them is their fickleness. He that depends upon your favours swim with fins of lead, and hews down oaks with rushes. Hang ye, trust ye, with every minute you do change a mind, and call him noble that was now your hate, him vile that was your garland. Someone whom you hate this minute, you will say he's noble the next. Someone whom you think vile this moment will become your hero next. These lines are prophetic. This is exactly what happens between Martius and the people later on. Now he is the chief enemy of the people, but when he's back from the war victorious, people line the streets to see him, to cheer him. They give him their votes when he is with them in the marketplace. Within the same act, same scene, as soon as he leaves, they take the vote back. Next thing you know, they shout, "Down with him," but as soon as they hear he's back in revenge, they say, "For mine own part, when I said banish him, I said 'twas pity." No, you didn't. And so did I. And so did I. And to say the truth, so did very many of us. That we did. We did for the best. And though we willingly consented to his banishment, yet it was against our will. They did it willingly, but it was against their will. This is where I wholeheartedly agree with Coriolanus' judgment on them. It sounded harsh then, but facing these fickle fools, what can I say but echo Coriolanus in Act 1, Scene 1. Hang ye, trust ye? Coriolanus was completely correct. With every minute you do change a mind, and call him noble that was now your hate, him vile that was your garland. After all this back and forth between Coriolanus and the people, there's one speech that I was particularly drawn to. After the victory on the battlefield, Coriolanus goes to the marketplace to ask the common people for their votes for him to become consul. Just to clarify the definition of consul, consul in ancient Rome is each of the 2 annually elected chief magistrates who jointly rule the republic. And this is what Coriolanus says. Your voices, for your voices I have fought, watched for your voices. For your voices bear of wounds 24 odd, battles thrice 6 I have seen and heard of. For your voices have done many things, some less, some more. Your voices, indeed, I would be consul. For your voices I have fought and watched. Did he do the fighting, shed his blood, and stand guard in the middle of the night, tired and cold, thinking if he does that, people are more likely to vote for him? No, not any soldier will do that, and Coriolanus is the truest of soldiers. He does it because that's the right thing to do. As a Roman, it's right to fight and watch to protect his home country. It's for you, your life and your home I have fought, not your vote. Isn't that obvious? It should be obvious. Coriolanus fights for you, and you should give him your vote, naturally, in gratitude. He deserves it. But the custom demands that he has to ask for it, in his own words, to beg. He's playing the part of begging and saying what's expected of him to fulfill the custom and to make the people happy. But for himself, this is utter humiliation. For your voices, bare of wounds 2,000 odd, battles thrice 6 I have seen and heard of. He has plenty bloody stories to tell, to impress them with. He has plenty scars and wounds to show them if he wants to. He could have said, like many people probably did say before him, that I fought in 18 battles since I was 16. I have 3 scars on my back, one from this city and one from when a giant ambushed me, like his mother and Menenius. They count and remember all his wounds. Shakespeare gives us this little absurd dialogue between Coriolanus' mother and old friend as a contrast. In the shoulder and in the left arm, there will be large cicatrice scars to show the people when he shall stand for his place. He received in the repose of Tarquin 7 hurts in the body, 1 in the neck and 2 in the thigh. There's 9 that I know. He had before this last expedition 25 wounds upon him. Now is 27. Every gash was an enemy's grave. Coriolanus, if you don't want to be precise, you can exaggerate your stories a bit, dramatize them a bit, like Comenius the general promises to do on your behalf. I will report it, where senators shall mingle tears with smiles, where great patricians shall attend and shrug, in the end admire, where ladies shall be frighted and gladly quaked, hear more, where the dull tribunes that with the fusty plebeians hate thy honours shall say against their hearts, we thank the gods our Rome has such a soldier. Instead, Coriolanus just simply says, I bear wound 2,000 odd, and battles thrice 6 I have seen and heard of. Coriolanus hasn't just seen and heard of the battles. He was always at the front. He rushed into the city gate of Coriolis alone. He had the whole city to deal with alone. In contrast to the usual ways of the politicians, he tries very hard to minimize his efforts and bravery, and he seems to aim to impress people as little as possible. Why? Because I think boasting is against his sense of integrity. Words are false and empty. I will die for my country with my body, but I will not flatter you or entertain you with my tongue. Unreasonable as it is, when you spell it out, people don't like it. We will be flattered, we will be entertained by your scars, and we will hang on to our ancient rights. If you don't beg, we will not give our vote to you. We forget all about your battles, your scars, because the battles are won. Now we live in peace and security. What can I say but hang on? Despite all this, he asks the people patiently, reining in his temper. He's putting on a show, a most unwilling actor. On the one hand, he can't genuinely ask humbly because he thinks he deserves it without going through the formality of begging. Better it is to die. Better to starve than crave the hire which first we do deserve. On the other hand, he can't act hypocritically and play the politician either, because it's against his nature to brag about himself. I had rather be their servant in my way than sway with them in theirs. So when he cries, your voices, he's treading a very thin line here. On the one hand, he's making an effort to submit to people's expectation of him, but on the other hand, he's trying to be true to himself, to hold on to his integrity. It's a very vulnerable moment. I feel for him and I love him for it. That's also the highest point of the arc of his tragedy. He has won the victory, the battle, the glory and honor, and even a new title, Coriolanus, from the aristocrats, and now he even has the votes from the people. He has done nobly and cannot go without any honest man's voice. Therefore, let him be consul. The gods give him joy and make him good friend to the people. Amen, amen. God save thee, noble consul. All these victories seem to give him the false impression that he can be a winner in every area of life. His mother gives a very cinematic description of her godlike son. Hark, the trumpets. These are the ushers of marshes. Before him he carries noise, and behind him he leaves tears. Death, that dark spirit, in his nervy arm does lie, which being advanced declines, and then men die. It makes my hair stand up on the back of my neck. Very soon it turns out he's not in control of everything, things falls apart around him rapidly, and it's all downhill from this point on. He's confident he will be elected consul, but to his shocking surprise they deny him. He can't control people's heart, people's opinion of him, or the final result. When that happens, he experiences failure for the first time. He then resolves a reconciliation with the people, but he can't cope with the humiliation or control his temper. He can't control other people, he can't even control himself. He has always won battles, he has always conquered, he has never failed, and he's always praised for it. I think that upbringing and the life experience make it extremely difficult for him to face failure and admit defeat. It's impossible for Coriolanus. He'd rather be killed than be defeated, which is easier to achieve on the battlefield, but life is more complicated. Didn't George Washington say to Hamilton, "Dying is easy, young man, living is harder"? When the people shout, "Banish him, down with him," he shouts back, "I banish you," meaning I am not defeated, I am not forced to leave, I choose to leave. Even in this total disaster, he is still pretending that he is the one in charge. He wants absolute power, absolute control. He wants things to go his way. When it doesn't, the world collapses. He doesn't try to find a way to mend things or find a common ground to talk. He's too proud to compromise or even to explain himself. He just walks out saying, "Thus I turn my back. There is a world elsewhere," which sounds quite cool, but I think is the reason of his tragedy. He lives in the delusion of his absolute power. He's trying to play God. No human being has total control or even any control really of the result of war or people's opinion or one's own emotion. But Coriolanus lives in the delusion that he has. The harder he grips, the more he loses. In the end, he loses everything. I do love this man. It's really hard to watch him till the end. A lot of things happen in Act 4 and 5, which I avoided so not to spoil the story too much. There are also a lot of excellent speeches scattered in other parts of the play, which I can't comment on. This is the second Shakespeare character I analysed this month. The first one is Helen from All's Well That Ends Well, which is just as complicated, but her struggle is more in a man-woman relationship. Again, this is just my reading of Coriolanus. What do you think? And thanks again to our hosts for picking two excellent plays. I don't think I have time to read A Midsummer Night's Dream this month, but I will do it in November in my fantasy month. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next one.